Welcome to today's class, Climb Generation with Census Records. My name is Rhonda Hoffman. I'm the genealogy specialist at the Buffalo and Erie County Public Library. And I work in a place called the Grosvenor Room, which is our special collections department at the library. You never need to make an appointment to view the items in the Grosvenor Room unless you want to see a rare book. Otherwise, just come on in and there's always a librarian at the desk to assist you. Today, we're going to talk about, give you a basic overview of the census, how to access census records, how the census can help in genealogy research. We're going to look at a case study that shows how census records lead to other records. I'm going to talk briefly about New York State census records and censuses for specific population groups. The census is a questionnaire that's filled out every 10 years about U.S. residents and citizens abroad. It's a way for the government to collect statistics in order to plan for services and funding and the number of representatives for each state. The U.S. began a population census in 1790, and it's been taken every 10 years since. Unfortunately, the 1890 census was almost completely destroyed in a fire. All but 1% burned in 1921 in a fire that was at the Federal Commerce Building in Washington, D.C. Nothing survived for Western New York. There is a waiting period before we have access to census records. It's a 72-year waiting period. So the most recent censuses available is the 1950 census. And so in the year 2032, we'll get the 1960 census available for research. The census takers are the people who, they're also called census enumerators. They collect the information that's needed for the census. They were assigned a specific geographic area, and then they would visit all of the households in their area and ask the required questions and recorded the answers to all of the questions. This is an enumeration district map for Buffalo, just to kind of give you an idea of how big an enumeration district might be for a city. It's kind of faint, but you can see numbers. This is enumeration district 598. And where this blue border is, that's the entire enumeration district that the census taker assigned to that district would have traveled. When you're dealing with more rural areas, it's going to be a larger area that they would cover. There's something known as the official census day. So when a census taker would visit, they were instructed to ask questions as if time stopped on the census date. So here's a chart of the different census dates through 1930. And so in 1790, when someone visited a household, they would have, the people who answered the questions would have to answer it as if it was August 2nd of that year. So even if the census taker visited months later, they were supposed to answer the questions as if it was August 2nd. So if a baby was born after August 2nd, then that baby wouldn't be counted on the schedule. From 1940 and forward, it was a census minute. So they had to ask questions of a specific minute in time instead of a specific day. So, for example, in 1940, the census minute was 12:01 a.m. on April 1st, 1940. So if someone passed away at 12:02, but they were alive at 12:01, then they would be listed in the census. Everyone who is living in the United States is counted in the census. So that's both citizens and non-citizens living in the United States. From 1900 forward, American citizens living abroad were counted. Native Americans not living with the general population were not counted until 1900. Different questions are asked different year depending on the government's need. Instructions are given to the enumerators so that they know how to record the information correctly. Each year you'll see you can find these census instructions online easily by just searching for census instructions and then put in whatever year you're interested in. So this is for the 1850 census, and you'll see over time, first the instructions were really short and then they were pages and pages and pages long. So one thing, for example, if you're looking at a census record and you see the column with people's profession, you'll see certain terminology. Maybe you'll see someone who's listed as a farmer and someone listed as a farm laborer, and you want to know the difference. So you can look up for that question number, which was profession, trade, and occupation, and it will explain that the person owning the farm who pursues agriculture professionally or practically is recorded as the farmer. And then the men who are employed for wages by him are to be termed farm laborers. You might see something where someone is listed as a master carpenter and somebody else is just a carpenter. So usually the master is the one who is employing other people. And then when you're looking at clergymen, they were usually supposed to write the denominations that are indicated, and there's certain abbreviations that they used for the different denominations, and those are explained here. So if you see any kind of abbreviations and you don't understand what they are, you could look at the census instructions so that you understand what they are. Sometimes there would be very specific instructions about how to list people's place of birth. Sometimes, a lot of times in census records, you'll see that foreign places of birth were just listed as a country, but for some years they were asked to be a little more specific. For example, in 1920, the census was supposed to ask if someone says they were born in Austria, Hungary, Germany, Russia, or Turkey, as they were before the war, that being World War I, enter the name of the province, state, or region in which they were born, such as Alsace-Lorraine, Bohemia, Bavaria, German or Russian Poland, Croatia, Galicia, Finland, Slovakia, Slovakland, and etc. So you might get a little more specific detail. And they might also give instructions like this. If a person was born abroad but of American parents, write the birthplace as AM period, CIT period, that is American citizen. If the person was born at sea, write at sea. They're really kind of fun to read through, actually. The census schedules are the pieces of paper on which the census takers would write the answers to the census questions. These are what we use to do genealogy research. They look different every year because different questions are asked each year. The census is a snapshot. It shows those living at a particular residence on the census day. So I'm going to show you some ways to how you access census records. One of the ways that you can access census records through the library is called Ancestry Library Edition. To get to the library's databases, you go to our website, which is buffalolib.org, and then you select Research and Resources. And you'll see databases A to Z. And from home to access databases, there'll be a box here where you type in your card number. There are a number of genealogy databases, so you can click on genealogy. And then the first one I'm going to show you is Ancestry Library Edition. This is one that you cannot use from home, but it is available at all of our library locations. So whatever BECPL library that's closest to your home, you could use it there. And you can even bring your laptop to the library and log in using the library's Wi-Fi, and you can use Ancestry from your own personal device in the library. Ancestry Library Edition is about the same thing as Ancestry.com. So if you have Ancestry.com, it's very similar. The main difference is that some of the newspapers and books that are in Ancestry.com aren't in the library version, but the library version does have foreign records, and you may not subscribe to the foreign records from home. To get to the census records, the easiest thing to do is go to the search menu and then go to Census and Voter Lists. And there are census records from other countries in here too. So if you want to just use the US Federal Census collection, you can click over to the right here. And then you can either search the entire federal census from 1790 through 1950, or if you wanted to choose a specific year, you could choose a specific year. I'm just going to show you a quick search, searching across the whole federal census. It's good to start with a name if you know an approximate birth year and where the person lived. And you know, put whatever it is you know. Maybe you know a specific city, maybe you just know a county, maybe you just know a state. That's fine to put that in there. And you know, if you know that the place of birth, you could put that as well. You can add more information if you want. You could add some of their family members' names, but I'm just going to start like this. So I'm searching for Andrew Smitherman, who was born in 1884 and lived in Buffalo at one time. And here we can see, here's some different records for an Andrew Smitherman. These are all the person that I was looking for. I'm going to click on the 1930 census. You can hover over where it says the census year, and it'll give you some of the information that was written in the census, just so you can see if that's your right person. You know, you can look at the family member names to see if that's right. And if you think it's right, then you could view the image by clicking on it or clicking the view image button. And you can then zoom in to find him on the page. And here he is. This is who I was looking for. So where you see different numbers starting, this is a different address here. And you can see this is the street number 901. They lived on Michigan Avenue. And all of these people live at this address right here. And this would be, so this must have been a two-family home. This is another family in that same residence because they're still at 901 Michigan. So you can see everyone that lives in the household and different data about them written across the screen. You can see what the different columns mean at the top here. And we're going to go into more detail about what you can learn in the census. I'm going to show you one of the other places that you can get the access to the census records through the library is a database called Heritage Quest Online. This is one that you can use from home if you have a Buffalo and Erie County Public Library card. And if you're not from the Buffalo and Erie County area, your own library might subscribe to these databases. So you'll want to check with your public library. So here's the opening page. And what I usually do is just go to search. And then you can see the different records that are in Heritage Quest. And you could click on a specific census year here, or you could just click search census. And this is actually, it's the same records and the same index that is in Ancestry, but you can use it for home from free if you have a library card with us. So I'm not going to show you another search since it's the same thing, but I'm going to show you another way to access the census is using a site called Family Search. And it's just familysearch.org. This is a free website that anyone can use. The census records you can use from home. Some of the records you have to use at a family history library affiliate, which the Grosvenor Room is an affiliate, or at a family history center, which are located all across the country, usually in LDS churches. This is the genealogy website of the LDS church. So if you want to search census records, usually what I'll do is I'll just go to the search menu, go to records, and you can do search historical records. I usually go and click more options, and you can put in somebody's name. I'm going to search for one of my relatives who lived in Dunkirk, New York. And let's see here, you can put in different information. I'm going to put his birth year range as 1855 to 1865. And what you can do this, if you were to search right now, if you were to click the search button, it's going to search all of the historical records in Family Search. But if you only want the census, you can choose under Add Record Options, a type. You click type, and then you can click the census category and click search. And so here are some hits. And it's very, it's very similar to Ancestry. You can see some of the data is transcribed here, so you can see if it's your right person. And this is the Stephen I was looking for. And if you click on his name, it'll take you to this page where you can see more information. You can see his family members here. And then if you want to see the record itself, you can click on the image and then view it. You do have to have a free account to view the images. It is free. You don't get spammed or anything like that. Every once in a while, you will receive an email saying new records have been added to the database, which I find helpful. And there's the image, and you can see it's highlighted where he is on the page. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. And next, I'm going to talk about census records from 1850 to 1950. This is what the focus of the class will be. This is where you can learn the most information from census records. Census records for these years are very detailed. So the type of information that you can learn, it does, again, vary from census year to census year. But usually you're going to be able to learn key personal and family data. This slide shows a snippet of the Earl Stevens family from the 1930 census. You can see Earl and his wife, Viola. You can see all of the different relationships to the head of the household. See all of his different children. And at the bottom, there's his mom, Catherine Bereka. You'll see identifying information like their gender, male, female, their ethnicity, so W for white, their ages. You'll see as you go down the list, very young children, sometimes they would list their ages in years and the number of months. So 2 and 11/12 is 2 years and 11 months old. And then here's their marital status. So you can see that Catherine is a widow down here. You can see details of their lives. This is the Emery W. Livermore family. This is the 1860 census. All of the censuses for the time frame we're talking about will list people's profession. Emery was a farmer. Down here, Sophia, she's listed as a school teacher. This particular census year asked the value of everyone's real estate and then the value of their personal estate. So Emery, his property was worth $2,000, his real estate, and then $300 in other items. You'll usually see where the person was born, and it would be a US state name or a foreign country name. Sometimes you will see other personal information, and you will see antiquated terminology in these historical records. So down here, this is his brother Lyman, and he's listed as insane. This category lists different health information. You'll get help in estimating important dates. This is from the 1930 census, the John Harrison family. And this particular census year, it asks of married people, how old were you at your first marriage? And so we've got John was 22 and Anna was 16. And then you've got their ages. So you can estimate that they were married about the year 1916. Then you've got an idea, when to start looking for their marriage record. There's information for theory building. So this is the 1910 census. This is the Morris Yasmin family. And one of the questions that's asked is, your marital status. And for both Morris and Rose, we see M2 here, M2. So if you look at the census instructions, that M2 means if you were married these people were married more than once. So this could be their second marriage. It could be more than that. You can see down here, M1 means that this person was just married once. And then we've got a number of children here, and we've got a 6 and a 6. And that question is of Rose, how many children have you given birth to and how many are still living? 6 and 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So probably these are Rose's children, although it could be a combination, I suppose, if the census taker didn't write down the right information. But if she had 6 and 6 are still living, probably these are them. I suppose there could have been an adult. She's 35. If she had children very young, someone could not be living with them anymore, or someone could be living with a family member. So this could be a combination of Morris's and Rose's children, and you'd have to research to find out more information. You'll see clues to finding other records. This is the 1920 census. This is Josephine Barrick and others that are living in her household. You can see her son is living with her, as well as a number of boarders. This O and F, the O means that she owns a home, and the F means that it's free of mortgage. So now you know she owns property, and you could go search for deeds to find out about that. And then these other columns, this 1882 means that's the year that she immigrated to the United States. And then NA means she was naturalized. And 1885 is the year that she was naturalized. So, now you have an idea of when she came to the US. You could go start looking for passenger lists. You could go and start looking for naturalization records to find out more information about her. One of your handouts is going to be a chart of the different types of information that you can find for all of the different census years. So again, I will email you the handouts after class. Anyone who registered for the class will get an email with those documents. Next, we're going to look at a case study. Census records are known as the backbone of American genealogy. They're very essential to genealogy research. They have important data every 10 years that genealogists can use to build their family trees. So the case study, I picked one from a family I researched in the past from Wayne County, North Carolina. And I chose this family just for ease of following the family from the 20th century into the 19th century. So before you start searching in a census, you want to put together a summary of facts so you can properly identify the person. In census records, you want to think about what you know about them, who were their close family members, so parents, siblings, spouse, children, their names, their ages, the places they lived, the places they were born, and look at whatever records you might already have about them. So one of the records that I have, we're going to be looking at a gentleman named Rom Best and tracking him through time. So I had his death certificate, and it lists his birth date as November 18th, 1858, and his death date as May 18th, 1932. And they don't know exactly where he was born, except for North Carolina. It does list an informant, Lahomo Best. He died in Stony Creek. So the first census that he would be in, if we want to start from the present and work backwards, would be the 1930 census. And I also had his obituary, and his obituary named a number of his children here: Elijah Thomas Watson, John, Luby, Sam, and Henrietta, and that his spouse's name was Lou. So now I have better information to start searching for him in the census. And you can kind of just make a little summary. So we're going to add to this chart as we go through each census year. So here's all those key facts that I just mentioned. So you start with the most current census year available and pertinent to your research, and then work backwards. So we're starting with 1930, since he died in the 1930s. There he is, Rom Best. He's listed as the head of the household. There's his wife, Louise. He's got his child, Luby, and Henrietta is a daughter. And if you notice, you always want to pay attention to neighbors, because his neighbor is Sam Best. And he did have a son named Sam who was listed in his obituary. You want to just verify this is the right family. These were his family members that were listed in his obituary. 71 is the right age. And then you want to follow clues that you find in the census. So you can use the information found in the census records to help you form theories. So if your great-grandpa was single in 1900 and married in 1910, grandpa must have been married from 1900 to 1910. So a theory that we can make from this record is that Rom married Louise about the year 1914. Her age at first marriage, which is recorded in this census year, is 35. and she's 51 in the 1930 census. So they were married about the year 1914. So census records lead to other records. You want to follow up on the details given in the census records. If the census lists a person was in the military, search for military records. If the census lists someone was naturalized, search for those naturalization papers. So I searched for Louisa and Rom's marriage record, and I did find their marriage record. J.R. Best married a Lou Strickland on January, possibly the 1st, it's a little difficult to read, in 1913. And some key information that it gives right here are parents' names, and his parents are listed as Ben Best and Nancy Best, and it lists that they are both deceased at the time that he was married. So we can add the details that we just learned. We learned Lou's maiden name, and we learned Rom's parents' names. Looking further at the record, you were being a detective here, and we notice his age at first marriage is 19 years old, and he's 71 years old. He was born in 1858, and he's currently 71. So the marriage would have been in 1878, and Louise was only born in 1879. So now we know we're going to have to search for more marriages and look further in the census records to see who else he might have been married to. So I'm skipping ahead to the 1910 census, and here we see Rom J. Best with his son John, Sam, and Claude. He's 51 years old in this year, and he's listed as a widow. So his wife before Lou must have died before or in the year 1910. So we've got some added details, another spouse, and then a son named Claude, who we didn't previously know. Going to the 1900 census, Rom is listed as Judge R. Best. He's got a wife named Berta, who was born in January of 1870. The 1900 census lists the month and year that someone was born. This census also asks how many years was this couple married, about 6 years. So we can estimate that they were married about 1894. And now we've got some new family member names. So his children, we're adding Ida, Nancy, and Sally, and all the rest were in other records that we've seen so far. So I did search for this marriage. I did find it, Bertie Tyndall to J. Romulus Best on June 11th, 1893. So we've got some more information. We've learned more about his names. It seems like his full name might be Judge Romulus Best. We've got his first wife, and we've got 3 daughters that we didn't have before. So another theory that we can make from the data from the 1900 census is that Rom must have been married at least 3 times due to the children's ages and the date of his marriage to Bertie in 1893. Also, Bertie was born in 1870. And if we look at the children's ages in that census, we've got Elijah born in 1877. You see some other 1870s and 1880s and 1890s. So clearly he had children with another woman before Bertie. The 1890 census, of course, was burned in a fire, so there's nothing available for Wayne County, North Carolina. So if I look in the 1880 census, I see a Rom Best with Henrietta, and then his son Elijah. So we want to then look for a marriage certificate to see if there's a marriage record for Rom and Henrietta. And I found one in 1877. Romulus Best, October 9th, 19 years old, to Henrietta Pate, who was 20 years old. So there we have his first wife. So we've got her name added and the marriage date. So if we want to go back further, Rum was 19 and they married in 1877, which means he would have been a child of 11 to 12 years old in 1870. So he should be listed with his parents in the 1870 census. So here's 1870. We knew that his parents were Ben and Nancy Best, and we found a Nancy Best with sons Davis, Jeffersonia, and Romulus. So it looks like his father is not there in that year. So there's our extra data. So we can form a theory. Rom's father isn't listed with the family in 1870. He may have died. He may have been separated or divorced from Nancy, or he may be living elsewhere for work or to help family or for some other purpose. Then looking in the 1860 census, I do find a Benjamin Best with Nancy. We find Judge Romulus Sanders Best, 1 year old, and that's the right age to be our Rom. And we've got all of their children listed here. So we have a number of other details added, a lot of siblings. So thinking about Ben's potential death, you want to think about history when you're looking at these records, when you're doing genealogy research. Think about what major events may have happened in the US between 1860 and 1870. And of course, you're probably thinking of the Civil War like I did. So you can form a theory that maybe Ben died having to do with the Civil War. Unfortunately, there are no death records for this time frame for North Carolina. I could not find any kind of burial record for Benjamin, but it was a mass grave for Civil War soldiers in Goldsboro. This is it. Perhaps he's buried there, or perhaps just his gravestone doesn't exist anymore. So we could try to prove our theory and look for Civil War records related to Best, look for a will or estate file. So I did find a couple of Benjamin Bests who were from the right area, Wayne County, North Carolina, that enlisted in the Civil War. This person became a full corporal by the time he left service. This was another listing for someone who was in North Carolina local defense in Goldsboro, which is right near where the family lived. He also ranked out as a corporal, so these could be the same person, they could be different people, we're not sure. Best was a very common last name in this area. Looking in the 1850 census, here's Benjamin Best, Nancy, and their children. Ben was listed as a constable, so that does kind of line up with someone who might have been in a local guard. It kind of would make sense, but we don't really know for sure. I looked through land records to see what there might be, and the land records indicated that he was in the Goldsboro area in 1862 and 1863. So maybe that wasn't him, or maybe, if he was part of the local guard, it is possible that he could have done some land transactions as well while he was home, or maybe he just did those transactions at different times than when he was in the military. There was also, they had a son named Benjamin. So one of those people could have been his son, or it could just be somebody else. I did find that Ben died intestate, which means he didn't leave a will. He died in 1865, but I didn't have a specific date, just the year. These are his estate papers, and it does list his wife and all of the right children's name for it to be him. So it made me wonder, was his death associated with the war. We don't really know, but near the end of the war, in March and April of 1865, Sherman and 120,000 Union forces occupied Goldsboro in Wayne County, where they lived. The family lived in Pikeville, North Carolina, which was heavily destroyed and raided for food and supplies. His death could have been due to lack of supplies or food or a violent incident. The death could have come from an illness contracted during the war, or his death could be completely unassociated with the war. So that's the end of our case study. I know that was probably a lot. I'm going to move on to state census records now. So sometimes states took separate censuses at different time frames than the US federal governments did. Many, but not all states have them. They would do them, how they wanted them, different time frames. Some of them might have just done like 1 year. Some of them might have done it on a consistent number of years. We're lucky in New York State, if you've got New York State folks, that they did do quite a few censuses. The earliest was 1825. They did them every 10 years through 1875, and then they skipped to 1892, which is great because the 1890 census was burned in a fire. So if you have New York folks for that time frame, we've got the state census. And then they took it again in 1905, 15, and 25, and then they didn't take any more for the state of New York. No Erie County records survived before 1855, but some other counties did if you had people in other New York State counties. This is another one of the handouts that I'll send to you. It's the different information that you can learn in New York State Census records. I'm just going to point out a few things about New York State Census records that I really like. There's the 1925 census asks when and where a person was naturalized. So this Agnes Capella, it says through husband. For certain years, white wives were naturalized through their husband. Down here for Leonard Civallo, he was naturalized in 1922 in Buffalo. And then down here, Anthony Ferreira, he was naturalized through his father. So children were often naturalized through their parents automatically. So with this information, then you know where to go look for records. For the 1855 census, and actually the 1865 and 1875, all ask if someone was born in New York State, the censuses will list the specific county, which I love, because this is an early time frame, and oftentimes there aren't vital records and we don't know where these folks originated. So here you can see this person was born in Washington County, then Erie. If it's another state, they just listed the state. If it was another country, they just listed the country. Down here, somebody was born in Otsego County. So it'll help track your ancestors. This in 1855, this is the only year that it listed how many years were you a resident of this city or town. So for example, this John Craps was only here in this city for 4 months. So this could just indicate he moved from another US location, or this could give you a nice estimate of maybe this is when he came to the United States was 4 months ago. So you've got a really nice close estimate of when he moved to this area. The 1865 census lists a lot of data about those that were in the military during the Civil War. So this shows some deaths. So you've got the men's name and their ages and their marital status, and it will list the date of death here, the place of death. So like you can see here, someone died at Andersonville Prison, one of the big, horrible prisons in the South. And then it will tell the place of burial. So usually it would list the town, and then it will list why the cause of death over here. Some of these other columns list like how many dependents the person has. So it'll give you an idea of their family members as well. It gives you their ranks up here. There's some other data it gives too. 1865 and 1875 provide some marriages that happened in the year prior to the census date. So here's a Timothy Murphy who was 35, and he married Elizabeth Sweeney. And there's another surname in parentheses, and this is her maiden name, and she was previously married, and that was her previous married name. And then it gives the date and the city that they were married in and the type of ceremony. So RC means Roman Catholic, Lutheran, so over here, JP, so they just went to a justice of the peace here. Also in 1865 and 1875, deaths that occurred the year prior to the day the census was taken are listed. And these marriages and deaths are great because New York State didn't require the keeping of those records until the 1880s. So here we have somebody who passed away, the age, gender, ethnicity, marital status, the date of death. We've got then the cause of death over here. We've got occupation, where the person was born. Next, I'm going to talk about some specific population groups. Sometimes censuses were a little different. One of those are the census schedules of the enslaved. There were separate schedules taken in 1850 and 1860. Unfortunately, except in rare cases in 1860, these records did not name the enslaved. So unless they were 100 years old in 1860, the enslaved were not named. These records list the enslavers by name, and then the enslaved are listed with that person by age and gender categories only. Sometimes listings for large plantations appear to take the form of family groupings. Here's an example. So these names are not of an enslaved person. This is the slave holder, the enslaver. And this data, this isn't about the enslaver. These are the enslaved. So it'll have, this is an enslaved person, 23 years old, male, listed as Black. And then there would be a check mark if someone was a fugitive. There would be a check mark if someone was manumitted. So if this enslaver freed any of these individuals, there's some health information. And then this is an example of sometimes when an enslaved person is named. This Robert was 101 years old, and because he was over 100, his name is given. And this is the slaveholder. They're a little confusing to look at. Indigenous Americans, for most years between 1790 and 1950, the censuses did not count them those living on reservations or as nomad tribes because they were not taxed. 1900 was the first year that those people were listed on the federal census records. In 1900 and 1910, there were special schedules for Indigenous Americans, and they might list data such as tribal affiliation, the affiliation of their parents, what they called full or mixed blood, the percentage of what they call white blood. So here's the special schedule. You can see there's a special heading at the top. The first part will be the same questions that are asked of everyone else. And then the bottom part are special inquiries related to Indigenous Americans. So I'm just going to zoom in. So here's an individual's name. So they are Seneca, and their parents are both Seneca. And this is the quote unquote percentage of white blood. There were some special censuses taken from an act in 1884. And those were, it would be individuals who were formally affiliated with a tribe under federal supervision. Every territory was not necessarily recorded every year, but oftentimes you might be able to learn the name, age, gender, and sometimes relationships to the head of the household. Some actually list people's birth dates. Some will list their Indigenous name and their American name and their marital status. So the reservations around this area are included. So here's the Tonawanda Band residing on the Cattaraugus Reservation. So here we can see, so here's the English name, Kitty Silverhawk. If there was an Indigenous name, it would be listed here. And here's someone else living with her, Stephen. And it lists, he's her brother, and it lists their ages. And then here's another household here. There was also a special schedule for veterans taken in 1890. So Civil War Union veterans and their widows were listed. It would list their rank, their date of enlistment and discharge, their address, any disability that they incurred, sometimes other information. There's a remarks column. Some areas listed Confederates too, but this was supposed to be for Civil War Union veterans. So here's an example, Seth Curtis. He was a private in Company L, the 15th New York, I think that's Engineers. He enlisted September 1st, 1864, and he'd do his discharge June 13th, 1865. He served for 9 months and 12 days. Then down at the bottom, there's his address. So he lived in Buffalo, and his disability that he incurred was rheumatism. And sometimes there's remarks. You can see the second individual re-enlisted after the war too. So just to go over again, accessing these records, taking into consideration some of the special censuses that I just talked about. The Ancestry Library Edition has all of the US federal census. It has the veteran schedules, the Indian census rolls, and the New York State censuses from 1855 through 1925. And there are lots of other state censuses in Ancestry too. Heritage Quest, the one that you can use from home for us if you have a card, includes everything I just told you, except it doesn't include any of the state censuses. And Family Search, one of the handouts I'm going to give you lists a chart of where you can find all the different census records. Family Search has most of what I showed you as well. And that handout will show you that detail. If you're interested in learning more about the Grosvenor Room, we do have a website, and I'll send you a link to that. And we do have, if you click on guides and publications, you can see a lot of what we have in the Grosvenor Room through the guides. So that's everything that I have for you today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to stop the recording.